In this video I'm building a travel kit for a holiday, and I'm going to show you the supplies that I've chosen to help me to shrink down my usual studio palette from this to this. Let's have a look at what I did. So here's my my usual studio palette. There's about 18 colours in there. It's got 3/4 wells to mix in. I normally use the 2 on the left, the warm colours in the top well and the cool colours in the bottom well, and then I've got a larger well on the right there for really large washes. I normally have this card in there with just a reference of my whole palette on it. And I use this clear plastic one mostly for mixing bigger washes in. That's it, it stood me in good stead, and I want to get rid of it and take this instead. So I've bought this online, and these are the colours from my existing palettes, my studio palette if you like, that I would put into it if I was taking these tubes with me, which I'm not. So there's a yellow, a red and a blue, and then there's a mid-brown and a dark brown and a green and a dark. And those 7 colours I think I can make practically anything with. But I don't want to take these large tubes. So I bought this instead, a little starter set of Holbein colours. And it's got the red, yellow and blue, what I normally use. The 3 primaries, of course. So you can mix those together to get a variety of colours. There's the pigment information on the back of the tube. And then I've added a Payne's Grey, because there's no dark in the original set of 6. I bought a little travel gel, Sea White, one of my favourite paper producers, 200 GSM, cold press or not. Quite small, about 5-6 inches square. It's not a size I usually work with, so that's going to be a challenge. And this little very plasticky, it has to be said, palette, but it's nice and light. I wanted something light and cheap, and I'm going to squeeze out the colours in the setup I would normally use. So I tend to have warm colours on the top, and then the cooler colours down the middle, and then the dark colours on the bottom row. I'm just trying a stripe of each one in on the paper that I'm going to be using. That was the inside cover of the travel pad. So there's yellow and an orangey red, and then a brown, the burnt sienna, and then the crimson colour, and then there's a very vivid green, which is like a phthalo green, and then a phthalo bluish colour. I think it's got cobalt hue. And then the other one that I added at the bottom is the Payne's Grey dark. And then I thought I'd try and mix up a few colours that it doesn't really have in this set. So I'm trying to mix myself a red. Not quite sure why, because I've virtually never used red. But you can get a very strong vivid red by mixing together the crimson and the yellow. And then I thought I'd mix together the blue and the green, because they're both quite vivid versions of those colours, and I can get an approximation of a turquoise, so that's good. And then I thought to try and mix in a few of the darker colours, darker tones, by adding the Payne's Grey. There's my burnt umber substitute, which is a mix of burnt sienna and Payne's Grey, and then Payne's Grey and yellow to get a variety of greens, muted greens. And then I was just experimenting with mixing various greys and darks. Generally, if you use 2 opposite colours of the colour wheel, you will get a dark. That's a very nice dark, very neutral dark. And then here, for reference, is the Payne's Grey, which is what I normally use as a dark, which has a slight blue tint to it. And then finally I decided that I should mix up a purple colour, which turned into more of an ultramarine blue. Only 2 of those are single pigment paints. The rest are mixes of various pigments, which can sometimes lead to muddy colours. So I thought it was worth noting those down. So the first thing I normally do when I try out some new colours, and Viridian, this one's called Viridian Hue, It's quite a new one for me. I don't use this very often in the studio, and what I will normally do is make a swatch of the colour mixed with all my other colours. So I'm making a row across the top of the page. So I've got the Viridian hue, and the square in the centre there is a roughly 50-50 mix of the Viridian and yellow. And then moving across to the left, I had a bit more yellow. And then moving across again, I had a bit more yellow. And then I go back the other way and make a row across, which is half and half, and then roughly a third and 2/3, and then roughly a quarter and 75%. And yeah, I just do that for each colour. So the second row down is the Viridian mixed with red, which gives me a range of browns. And then the third row down is the Viridian mixed with sienna, which gives me more browns, not surprisingly. The fourth row down is Viridian mixed with the crimson, and then the Viridian mixed with blue, and then finally the Viridian mixed with the Payne's grey. And by doing this for each of the colours, don't forget this is just a Viridian, which is the stripe across the page on the left. You could get 7 pages, fill up 7 pages, one for each of the colours. But the basic point here is that I can see at a glance what I can do with the Viridian. And I chose this colour because it's not one that I would use very often. So the slightly surprising one is the fourth one down. That's Viridian mixed with crimson, and I've got some quite deep purples and purpley, bluey greens, quite rich bluey greens. And that's what I'm doing here in this little sketch. I'm using some of those surprising colour mixes to do a little tiny landscape. Now, the reason I've chosen this landscape is this is not from what I'm going to be seeing on holiday. It's what I'm more familiar with here at home. I just wanted to try out some of these colours to see how they performed, and I don't normally paint at such a small scale and on such a thin paper. This is, like I said, 200 GSM, and I wanted to see how it held up to 2 or 3 washes. I don't do lots and lots of layers normally, but I do like to paint wet into wet. So I wanted to see how the paper held up to that kind of treatment. And I'm also getting a little bit of practicing with a small brush. That's a number 3 synthetic round, because, like I said, I don't normally paint this small. I used to paint very small, so I need to re-familiarise myself with that. And then I just thought I'd splash on a couple of extra colours. So I'm pretty happy with this little kit. I've got 1 or 2 reservations on some of the colours, but we'll see how that goes. My next videos I'm going to be posting on location from the holiday trip. So we'll see exactly how we get on with it. As ever, thank you for watching. I hope you found some of this information useful. And I'll see you in the next video.